So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this evening's Have a Heart, Friendship and Activism of Jesús Lebrón exhibit celebration and community discussion. My name is Cynthia Tobar and I'm the head of archives here at Bronx Community College. And the BCC Archives has been thrilled to work with our community partners and co-sponsors to host this traveling exhibit over the course of the summer and fall semesters. The topic of this exhibit and tonight's community conversation is to celebrate Bronx-born Puerto Rican activist Jesús Lebrón's central role in struggles around LGBTQ. The exhibit, Have a Heart, consists of selections of Jesus's personal papers recently donated to the Bronx County Historical Archives at the Bronx County Historical Society Research Library. The papers document the formative ways in which Jesus and his upbringing in the South Bronx shaped the modern marriage equality movement. So, another round of applause. Before we officially begin, we want to acknowledge that BCC occupies the land of Lenni, Lenape, and Warpanger peoples. We acknowledge that as scholars, professionals, and inhabitants, we benefit from the continued dispossession of indigenous lands and peoples. We would also like to acknowledge the braided histories of slaves and freed slaves who were forcibly stolen and brought to these lands, and the intertwining of those histories with the stories of immigrants who work in the kitchens, the houses, and the fields. We respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather includes occupied, unceded, and seized territory. We pay respects to the elders of these lands, past, present, and emerging. Secondly, I'm so grateful to partner with Bronx County Historical Society to host the exhibit, the traveling exhibit, the first stop for this exhibit and tonight's event, and especially for partnering with Stephen Payne, who basically, this was his vision. He mobilized all of this to make this happen. All of this. So thank you so much. And I'd love to give a shout out to tonight's co-sponsor, the Bronx Community College LGBTQ plus resource room. We're so grateful for this partnership. And without further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Stephen Payne. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cynthia. And yeah, it is such a delight to be here. I feel like in many ways this exhibit is a kind of celebration of making things possible in the midst of impossibilities. For multiple reasons. The event tonight was actually originally scheduled to take place at the beginning of the exhibit on October 11th, National Coming Out Day. But our good friend Brendan and his partner Tom were in an accident a couple weeks beforehand. Thankfully, as you can see, they have emerged in good spirits and are still recovering. So we moved the event back to tonight. I have my mask on because I caught COVID last week. Jesus is actually feeling under the weather tonight. So it's in many ways a miracle that we're pulling this event off tonight. And I feel like that's kind of the theme, at least that I really have noticed in Jesus's papers, which the Bronx Historical Society is so very grateful to be the caretakers of. And Jesus and Brendan donated the papers to us over the summer, and Pastor, the research librarian, Pastor is right here, and myself have been working on the papers since then. And what I mean by this theme of seeing and making happen possibilities in the midst of impossibilities, I think Jesus' life is really a testament to that, as he himself will talk about tonight. So many instances where most folks would, very understandably give in to despair and stop struggling, or at least tone down struggling. Jesus amplified his struggles, and I'm just really, really appreciative of the legacy that Jesus has built in his life of struggle. And for multiple reasons, I feel like November 11th today ended up being the perfect day, because there are also multiple other instances of making possible things in the midst of impossibilities that we can commemorate today. Nat Turner, who led one of the largest slave rebellions in U.S. history, was executed today. And in the aftermath of his execution, I'm sure and I know that the general consensus was that slavery would be around in the U.S. In perpetuity. And in fact, the Confederacy was formed for that very purpose, to make slavery a reality of perpetuity. But here we are. Slavery is no more. Possibility that was made in the midst of impossibilities, the whole struggle against slavery. Also on November 11th in the 1880s, a group of workers on this day were executed. They had been protesting for something as simple or as simple sounding as an 8-hour day in 1886 on May 4th in Chicago. The Haymarket Martyrs is what they're known as. And they were executed a little after that event in 1887 on November 11th. So this is a day where it might seem throughout history that there are impossible odds, but folks have continued to struggle and have continued to go on, and Jesus is a prime exemplar of that, not only with regard to LGBTQ plus rights, not only with regard to marriage equality, but with regard to human rights in general, and his papers document that. They document a different kind of temporality, a different kind of time frame, because when folks hear about the 1980s, 1990s, the kind of general nonsense history that they get is everything was perfect, Reaganomics brought prosperity to everyone, and in point of fact, the vast majority of people suffered even more during that period of time. And Jesus' struggles went on at this very moment in time of despair in the 1980s and 1990s and early 2000s. And I imagine, I don't want to speak for Jesus, but I imagine that Jesus would have never imagined at that moment in time that marriage equality would become, at least for the time being, the law of the land in the United States during his lifetime even. So a spectacular instance of something that seemed impossible even a couple decades ago becoming a possibility. And of course, as I would hope that all of us in this room know, those possibilities have to continue to be struggled for each and every day, because in as much as struggles like Jesus's make possible the impossible, at the same moment in time, there are very strong forces at work in this country right now seeking to take away any kind of possibilities that we've been able to create for human beings. So this event is historical because it celebrates one of the most pivotal figures in not only the marriage equality movement and the movement for LGBTQ plus rights, but movement for human rights in general. But it's also historical because it occurs at this very moment in time, and it clues us into these moments in the past that we can use now to inform the struggles that we're engaged in today. So I'll stop with that. I have COVID brain, so I apologize for any incoherencies, and I'm very grateful for all of you being here tonight. Then I'll end on the note of gratitude. Thank you first and foremost to you, Jesus, for opening up your life to me, for trusting me with your stories. And it's been such a pleasure getting to know you already, and I look forward to getting to know you even more. And thank you also to Brendan for opening up your heart and life, and to Tom for welcoming me into your house in Queens, and your hospitality, and I really appreciate all of you. And thank you, Em, for bringing all of this together with the LGBTQI plus resource room. It's such a huge addition to this event. And thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And thank you, all of you, and of course, Pastor. And a shout out, even though she's shaking her head, to my life partner, my better half, Rachel. Yay! A true Bronxite. I only wish I were. Unfortunately, I wasn't born here, and she reminds me of that. But thank you to all of you for being here, and I look forward to our conversation tonight. All right. So at this point, we'll be having a community conversation, and Dr. Emelinda McSpadden and myself will kind of be loosely guiding the conversation, but really we're most excited to hear from the panelists. So go ahead, Emily.
I want to first of all say thank you for including us, and thank you to all of you for being here for what I can only describe as just a significant event on myriad levels. I am an associate professor of psychology here at Bronx Community College. I've been here for many years, by my count anyway. And I find that it hasn't been a conversation that's taken place here before. And so the fact that we're embarking in this way and in this place with current students, I think is a remarkable opportunity that I just hope can continue. I see this as the beginning of a conversation and not just like an individual event. So I'm just ever so pleased to be here. It's momentous, it's amazing, and I will also, I won't speak for either of you, but I will have Jay and Millie here, who are very active participants in the LGBTQI resource room here on campus, who are both, you know, relatively new students here on campus, but are already on fire, and just cannot wait for you to get to know them, for the conversation between you four in particular, and anything that, of course, Stephen and I can do to help facilitate that conversation. So, without much more ado than that, the basic beginning of a conversation is an introduction, right? So I think I'll start over there and move this way, all right? So Jesus, we'll start with you. Just tell us what you'd like us to know about you, and basically, you know, I mean, it's interesting to put it this way because the prompt is a cool one, but how you ended up here, which I know is very storied.
Yeah, well, I guess it's good about it. But before I answer that, I just want to say thank you to all of you for doing this for me. Stephen, this is really very special. And, you know, you do all this work that I'm very proud to have done. But it needs acknowledgement, it needs celebration, and that's what we're doing today. So I'm just very grateful for that. Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Councilman Pat. Very nice. So, how did I come here? Get to be here? I can only say that I was born in the South Bronx to a single-parent home. It was a very difficult environment. And my mother instilled upon us a sense of selfishness and a kind of will to want to better ourselves. And in all that, I came to learn that finding self-respect included soliciting respect from others and demanding respect from others. And that included the LGBT movement and politics and what have you. And I just found my way into politics and activism, and largely because I found insult in my environment back in the 80s and 90s. It was a very hostile period in government against LGBT people. I was a person living with HIV/AIDS back then. And I had many more years to live, according to my primary care physician. And I was on a roll back then, in the 80s. Brendan, something to that?
On a roll, of course, that's when we met in the 80s. Well, I don't have yours, or will I? Yeah, say hello. So I'm Brendan Fay, and I'm always so moved to be in spaces like this, spaces that open up for a conversation. For me, as someone who is gay, who is queer, or LGBT persons, who, as I was, spent most of my childhood and life growing up in a world where it was a criminal offence, as it was in Ireland. Homosexuality was a criminal offence until 1993. It was defined and treated as a sickness, and I spoke with priests and different people and saying there's something wrong with me. I call that internalizing your culture. We breathe it, we soak it, it gets into us. So I don't take, how does a human person go from that way of being in the world, or the way the world tells you how to be in the world? This is your place. People like you maybe can be hairdressers or priests or this or this or this, but there's a containing, there's an ostracizing, there is a demeaning, as Jesus mentioned. And I really didn't have what Jesus had, which I love that he always, I should say, I'm here because of Jesus Lebrón and a friendship that developed when one day, I'm from Ireland. Now, most people in Ireland can't, when they think of New York, they think of the Statue of Liberty and whatever. I was coming to study at St. John's, but also I had already heard of Christopher Street and a riot and a rebellion and a movement that had taken place. And I often said to people, pardon me, I couldn't wait to get out of Ireland. Most people say they can't wait to get to Ireland. I tell people I couldn't wait to get out. I'm very moved by the Ireland that has evolved now, where we became the first country in the world to extend marriage equality by vote of the people. Also in 2015 in July, we became a country in Europe with among the most progressive legislation on transgender rights. And that continues. That we're all on a journey as persons, as communities, as nations, but it's about belonging as well. So I want to say, I love the title, Have a Heart, Friendship and Activism in Jesus Lebrón's story. As kind of queer people, we often hear about activism, and that's very celebrated. Activists, protest. This is sort of an image. And by the way, I've been arrested many times, and that's a title that I am very proud of. But already as an Irish person, I'd already picked up the importance of activism, I will say, in Ireland. In fact, my Catholic upbringing, oddly enough, had said to me, it's not enough to go to church, you have to be concerned about the world you live in and making a difference. So the Catholic crowd I was hanging out with taught me how to care about apartheid in South Africa, the mistreatment of people in Central America, nuclear weapons. But my point is, when it came to LGBT issues, no. Justice did not extend there. That was until I came to New York, and one day made my way to Greenwich Village, to Christopher Street, and walked into the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop, which was the world's first LGBT bookshop. And I remember having this almost, it's some kind of pause in my body, and before I go in and enter spaces. Maybe nobody feels that now, but we're doing a bit of truth-telling here. But I remember I walked in and I met the owner, Craig Rodwell, who's a great pioneer of our movement. But also that very first day I met Jesus Lebrón, who at that time was manager of the bookshop. And something, that beautiful energy happened between us. And that was back in 1987. Maybe you weren't born then. It's unbelievable how friendship can transform your life, or meeting, or just saying hello and being welcoming and hospitable. And that's what I tell we, especially, who have experience in hospitality and unwelcome, need to be kind to one another and generous in our welcome and creating spaces that are warm and welcoming and give hope to us. That's what Jesus did for me. And so, anyway, and here I am all this time.
Okay, what about you?
All right, well, it's my turn. Well, my name is Juan Carlos Vasquez, or Jay, as everyone around me knows me as. It's actually not my first time here at BCC. So I was here in 2018 Unfortunately, at the time, I wasn't prepared, all right? I was, like I like to say, I was a statistic, you know? Something that, it's not the best thing to say because it's kind of dirty. But, because of course, ideally, we want to change those statistics. Anyway, I digest. It's second time here, like I said, very involved with the community. I'm grateful for Dr. McSpadden bringing us in, taking us under her wing. I've met lots of great colleagues this semester. I'm still on the fence of what I want to major in. It's been up and down. I'm hoping to go into radiology, but until then, just do a little bit of everything, I guess. I'm really grateful as well to everyone for having us all here, being able to speak with everyone, give our own experiences and perspectives. As Mr. Lebrón says, as Brendan says, it's very imperative that we share our experiences, that we create these environments for people to feel safe. You know, it's one thing to say, let's create something. It's another thing to make sure that these environments are very inclusive, that people feel safe to, you know, be an activist, you know? I'm not sure what else. I'm not very a prideful person in terms of speaking to myself. I wouldn't know what else to really say, but...
Hi, everyone. So I'm actually really shy of speaking in front of people, so I'll do my best. What landed me here? First of all, my name is Millie, so nice to meet you all. And I previously attended college years back in 2009. You know, I was fresh out of high school. I had just come out of the closet a year prior to that. But my experience wasn't the white picket fence and the things you see on TV, you know. I faced rejection. I was kicked out of my home. I, lived in the shelter for some period of time. I have struggled, and I don't struggle as much now because I'm much older, but I struggled with my identity for a while. And you get to a place where you get tired of being the victim, and you decide it's time to start fighting back. You take your power back. So I took my power back, and now I'm here, and I'm doing the work. Every day is a challenge, but each day is a new day to make it better. So I want to become a social worker one day because I want to help the youth that, I was once the youth and I didn't have those resources. My first glimpse of community or anything gay or, was Christopher Street. Getting off that one train and walking down, 7th Avenue South and the big gay ice cream shop and West 4th. Like, that was my whole experience, and I got my entire life being down there because you see people who look like you align yourself with people who do the same things that you do, and it just became a place where you could be free and be authentic. And you didn't have to worry about the traumas of, when you get back home, what's your mother going to do? Is she going to open the door? Or are you going to be sleeping on the street? I say all that to say what landed me here is, I moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago, and I was back and forth trying to figure out what my purpose was. I had worked in retail for 15 years, and then the pandemic hit, I turned 30, and then I'm like, okay, well, what's next? What is the next 15 or 20 years of my life going to look like? And then I figured it out. I'm like, I want to help people. There'll be a whole new generation of gays, youth, so to speak, especially, people who look like me. They may face rejection from their families, and they'll need help. They'll need resources. They'll need someone to talk to. They'll just need a hug. They'll need someone to tell them it's okay. I didn't have any of the things that I just mentioned, so I want to be that vessel for the next generation of queer youth. And, every day is not an easy day, but I make the most of it, and I come here with a smile on my face, and we have a wonderful mentor here, so she keeps all of us afloat. And I just want to continue taking each day by the reins and making the most of it.
Well, I think that's a very natural segue to one of the other questions that we're organizing tonight around, which is to share a little bit, as much as you want, or as little as you want, about your experience or experiences coming out, the whole process. And yeah, Jesus, why don't you start us off here?
My experience in coming out was fine. I believe I came out little by little to my siblings and to my mom eventually, who was very angry at first when I disclosed to her that I was gay. She came around. She came around in a very significant way, in that she welcomed my boyfriend and come home, and she befriended, them very, very nicely. There was one friend of mine, God bless him, Miguel Maldonado, someone that I was dating for a while, and he died of AIDS, but she was very friendly with him. She was very traumatized at his death, yeah, coming out was, I have to say, not as traumatic as it has been for so many others. Just hasn't been. Of course, living in the South Bronx, I would dare to say it was a bit more of a struggle as an openly gay man, very much equal culture. There's a lot more with the South Bronx that was more pressing. The South Bronx at the time, it was burning. I don't know if you all know about the history of the South Bronx, but I lived in the projects of the South Bronx back in the 70s, and my experience in the Bronx was looking out the window and seeing buildings burning down all the way around me. That was what I recall seeing a lot in the South Bronx. A lot of the buildings that we had were burned to rubble. We all know the history of that. At least I think we all know that was largely, tenants not being able to afford, being able to pay the rent, and landlords seeking insurance and just burning the buildings down. That happened, and there was all the other stuff that comes with poverty and despair, and all that impacted my future. I sought to lead the South Bronx, and I did. And but coming out was fine. I fortunately connected with folks at the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop back in '85. And I learned from, these were very pioneer activists at the Oscar Wilde Bookshop at the time. They were lesbian separatists working behind the counter. They were really hardcore gay activists, including my boss, Trade Watermelons, Brendan had told me about. And so they were a great influence for me. But also, as I said earlier, briefly, my mom was. I came out to be the kind of person that just tolerated ignorance and hatred very little. And my brother Willie testified to this. Coming out is a process, as always has been, and it's not the end of the story just coming out. I mean, you can come out to parents, but you're still faced with the daily challenges of their just perhaps not understanding things, saying things that are insulting, or just being very uncomfortable with things about you and your being gay. And so there was a lot of back and forth, but inevitably I learned that they are learning just as I am, and it'll always be a learning process. But people are capable of learning. People are capable of coming around. People are capable of knowing that in being a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender person, you can be a good person. And oftentimes we are. And people come to learn that, and including my parents and my brothers and sisters. And that was my case.
One of my, just to interject for a second, one of my favorite items on display in the display case is the interview feature with you shortly after the whole Reverend Ruben Diaz ordeal, and there's a picture of you and your family on the day of your bereavement. And I feel like that's such a powerful picture because underneath it, there's also your discussion. I think the interviewer asked you, I forget the exact question, but you answered one of the reasons why I was so insulted by Reverend Diaz was he says that gay people are an insult to Latinos, but the Latinos that I know are my family and they love me and support me. Are they homophobic? Of course sometimes they are. And I feel like that's such a profound answer that you give. With that picture right there too, showing that although it's a learning process for your family, they show up to support you, at least at that moment in time.
Yeah, very much so. I would never have forgiven them. My family has been great. I love my family. They've been really good to me. They love me back. And I'm going to pray front on as well.
Wow. Well, it's interesting that, to be honest with you, I feel like the Lebrons, and especially Jesus, is when I speak about coming out, I always speak about it's not something we do ourselves. Somebody is mentoring a path and awakening hope inside. And I am so grateful that I came to New York and stepped into a movement that was on fire and on the streets and visible. I always felt, though, I wonder how you become part of this. How could I feel? I was doing well academically and studying and then when I went into the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop and met this man here, Jesus Lebrón, who changed my life. I belong to another group where they have a phrase that says, let us love you until you can love yourself. And in a way, that's what Jesus Lebrón gave me. It's like, who will love you out of the entrapped way that you've been trapped by culture, by law, by religion, by medicine, by psychiatry. And we do that for one another. That's why I love the word gay liberation. We use that word liberation. And it's not some vague notion. It is a very real, concrete, breathing, living experience for all of us. And I will be forever grateful to Jesus and his loving me into coming out. But it's, how do you come out? And so I went about, I hurt, I anger, I rage, I had so much, but being Irish, we say we're not into feelings, really, we our emotions, we drink the pain away, And I remember I met Jesus, who constantly would use language like our esteem, dignity, having a sense of self. So I always felt his sense of being gay was grounded in some strong sense of himself. And I said, I wonder, I would love to have a piece, some of that spirit. And in fact, actually I did. I went and I got help from a wonderful lesbian therapist whom I sat with. Remember Ellen Chomsky? And I often said, you go to America and here's what you get. But that work I learned from him. Coming out is an interior journey of accepting self and saying, I am worth. I am a person. I belong in the human family. And somehow we just have to start taking in ourselves, then somehow finding the courage and the self-dignity to begin to name who we are. And so the first family, I remember one of Jesus and I were lovers fairly quickly, and on the streets and activism, and I remember one of the first Christmases, the first Christmas Eve, and he said, my family, my mother would like you to come to our house for Christmas. And I was like, what? I did not know any other lesbian or gay person who was out to their family or would introduce me. I'd never actually met somebody until I met Jesus, and who told me that his family actually wanted me to be part of this celebration. And forever, I tell people it is the greatest Christmas gift that I have ever received. his mom and the family with their dancing and food and all of that, but it's this beautiful gift of hospitality to say, you are welcome and we love you as well. And you know what? And that kind of bond has even stayed. We were lovers for some years, then became the closest of friends. Jesus is in my life the closest soul friend. And that's why I love that word friendship. That's what I would say to people. Get out there, get on the streets, be an activist. My line is, be as active in the streets as you are in the sheets. Take your dog from the streets to the streets. And sometimes say our movement is from the sheets to the streets, but whatever. Although some of us on the streets need to find a way back to the sheets. But find love, and live it, and passion, and give it to one another. And that's coming out so beautiful. And Jesus is right, it's not just a once-off. You do cross a certain threshold that's so beautiful. I remember, like Jesus, I came out to my family, they were not happy at all. So I think that's a process. My family are not like that. That's, of course, little do they know, we're all on this journey out of homophobia. So my family, once I learned from Jesus and his family, and I remember thinking, I want what that family has. I want what Jesus has. But the family has, with one another, working through so much. When I met Jesus at the Oscar Wilde, one of the loveliest things, my life was so lonely. Sometimes as a gay person, I could cook, sing, my mother loved me, family, do this, do this, do this, do this. But I had never danced, ever, with a gay man in my life until I met Jesus Lebrón in the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop. And after closing hours, this is a moment I always remember, is the two of us just dancing in between the bookshelves and to the music of...
lesbian folk music.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, one honey near and...
It was our routine every weekend when we close the shop.
That's right. Yeah. Just, so I always tell people, I don't want to be part of your revolution if there's no dance. Take time to dance and find a person who will dance with you for the pure joy of it, because we need it. And this was at the height of the AIDS crisis. And I love this. This is about our movement. And some people misunderstand. You know, how can you be so enraged about our gatherings, our celebrations? We call them, some call it a pride march, a civil rights march for human rights for us. But there's also, it's full of disco and dance, and you can be wearing feathers or leather. It's sort of like just be yourself. I found that even a radical idea, the invitation to express and be yourself. So what do I want to say? I had a master's degree. I was teaching in New York, and yet the most basic things of life, I was only beginning to learn. Can I be honest here as well? I remember when I used to go to some of the bars, and guys would ask me, what is your name? God, I never ever said this. I would actually give a false name. It's being in a place where you don't... It's a very beautiful moment when people help you to come out and to love yourself. It's a very moving process, and I'm so grateful for all our community who, you know, took to the streets and fought for our rights. I'm so grateful for therapists who challenged the psychological system here to overturn homophobic treatments. Imagine our types were given electric shocks, were put away, were hospitalized, were lobotomized. And so that's why coming out is such a beautiful thing. And I would love to see more schools saying coming out day is a very profound invitation. I want to thank everyone all of you who have been on that journey of coming out. Because it takes courage, doesn't it? It does. And it takes honesty, and it's not easy, and it's something we do every day. But I am so grateful to Jesus, who loved me so until I could love myself, and to Willie and the Lebrons, who gave me the most beautiful gift of all, because then I went back to my family, and they were a bit shocked, you know, when I came out to my father. My sisters, by the way, siblings are like this. They were like, we can handle it, but don't tell. My sister said to me, Brendan, don't tell the mother and father, you know. The father will have a heart attack and the mother will be on her nerve tablets, and, you know, but we can handle it. But already, from the Lebrons, I could not, I couldn't God. So I'm forever grateful for what this Puerto Rican family, and especially because of Jesus, gave me. And the acceptance and the love was huge. And I'm just going to throw in one other last thing is, it's like own everything about who you are. I picked up from Jesus and his family a beautiful sense of identity as a Puerto Rican in a world of discrimination So owning your culture, loving your culture, having that the pieces of ourselves is a huge gift as well. And so that's coming up for me. I will say, Jesus helped me so much to be out on the streets. The first place I really came out was when I marched with Jesus in the Pride Parade. That's such a beautiful, emotional space to say you are not alone. You belong to a beautiful movement of human beings. I know we have a lot of cynics and critics and whatever about pride and all this, but I see it as the space where, and I always think there is somebody who's just beginning the journey, and this might be their first. I am responsible for creating a space of hospitality and happiness, and drop the bitterness, do you know what I mean, or whatever. I can go, do you know what I mean? And I've often said to people, that's where learning parades can be beautiful spaces of celebration and joy and love. But for us as LGBT queer people, we also brought our grief, our anger, our joy, our dance, our hope, and our fire, and I love that. And then I said to people, oh my God, if we can be Irish in the New York City Pride Parade, maybe we could be gay in the Irish Parade. And that began a whole other movement coming out. Because, by the way, you know what sometimes we're told, listen, you have your own day. You belong in the ghetto, in the village. Jesus supported that movement of Irish LGBT immigrants coming out and marching in our own Irish community. I could not have done that without that support at the very beginning. So it's I'm very, very grateful to be sitting here and for the movement we're all part of. Thanks.
Oh, my turn. I always like to think that basically everyone, when you're in the closet, you're in that process of coming out, there's always the expectation or the desire, the dream of, having that perfect coming out, where you're gonna come out to your friends and your family and everything might be great. Of course, there's gonna be the scenarios where you think of, the what ifs, this and that. But that core desire of having that perfect outing, it may be more of a mainstream thing with our culture. You do see that a lot on TV. I definitely had that perspective growing up. I always had that dream, all right, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that, it's going to be great. Unfortunately, it didn't happen like that. I had something what I call falling out of the closet. So, yeah. So as you can imagine, it wasn't on my own accord. My family found out. It was a rough, awkward point in time. It was very divided too. It was the Greens versus the Blacks in Game of Thrones right there. My mother's side of the family, they were very supportive. My siblings as well. We love you, who cares? My father's side though was very icy, very cold. It was never brought up. It was just swept under the rug. But with time, as Mr. Lebrón said, people are capable of learning. My father reached out more. We have a better relationship. And it won't happen with everyone, for sure. It's a case-by-case scenario, but we shouldn't let those expectations of other people bring you down. In my case scenario, it took me some time, but thank God for the people around me, my loved ones. I kept on fighting, and here I am today. I'm grateful always for whatever situation it was. I always take it as a learning experience, something to share with everyone else. Because there's a lot of people that, believe it or not, they do relate in some way or another. But overall, it could have been much worse as well. We see that a lot. So, my coming out.
My turn. I'm not one to sugarcoat. I believe transparency is a real thing and owning your story. I was reluctant to even come tonight because a part of me coming tonight would be unpacking my story, unpacking the trauma. It was not a happy time for me. It was hell. You have to suppress how you feel. When you leave school after being bullied from second period to seventh period, then you go home to where your safe space is supposed to be. But, you're taunted, you're abused, I'm just going to use an expletive, you're called faggot, you're told that you're worthless. All these things, you're berated constantly. You kind of start to believe it. And so, when I knew, first and foremost, I just knew when I could walk and talk that I was going to be something different. I was not like your ordinary kid. I had a head full of hair, and I knew that I was unique, and I knew that I had a light that was going to shine through no matter who it resonated with, and no matter who liked it or appreciated it. I just knew that I was different. And when I finally got the courage to say the words, I'm gay, at that point, family knew about it already, okay? I'm not the first gay from my family. I have other men in my family who had hidden closets for years. Some never found the strength to come out. And so for me, when I finally did say the words, it was a huge thing because now it's like, okay, she's come out full force. I had the hair and the makeup and the heels and I got to a point where I'm like, I saw RuPaul on TV and people love RuPaul. Well, RuPaul's a global icon. And I'm like, if RuPaul can be a black man on TV, wearing hair, doing makeup, doing this, doing all that, I'm like, the world loves him. Everyone will love me too. But unfortunately, that was not my reality. And I had to realize, in order for me to live my most authentic life, I have to break away from the people who hinder me and hurt me and prevent me from doing so. To this day, presently, I grew up in a single parent home, so there was not a father present. I don't think that has anything to do with how I turned out. And even now, presently, when I navigate in my everyday life, people always ask me like, oh, well, what was your childhood like? What was your parents like? And I'm like, parent, let's be clear on the parent, but, people always ask me, how did you get to the place where you are now? How did you find who you are now? And I'm like, this is who I always was. I just didn't understand and I wasn't ready to embrace it, but this is who I was destined to be. No father, no perfect white picket fence or perfect home was going to change what is me and what is, who I am now as a person. So I say all that to say, though I didn't have the ideal coming out story, my family, though I don't talk too much of them now, I just feel I had to get out of that negative space to really live the life that I'm living now. I don't think that I would be a college student at 31, going back to pursue a degree in social work when I wouldn't even share not even a glimpse of what I went through with anybody 10 years ago. Now I'm like an open book to an extent because I know that my story as well as the rest of these gentlemen's story, is going to help somebody who may need to hear, like, it's going to be okay. So I'll end with that, because otherwise I'll keep going. But I just want everyone to know, like, this is the most safest I've ever felt in a forum, or in a, college, but I never had a safe space before. So I was not afforded the luxury, that you were afforded. And I didn't have the family who accepted me no matter what and showed me what love looked like with no conditions. It was like, we love you, but you need to change this. We love you, but you can't be that. We love you, but maybe you should wear your hair like that, or maybe you shouldn't dress like that. So it was always a condition to how love was shown. And now that I'm a student here and, we're doing the work, I know whenever I come and I'm in a space with my colleagues, it is a safe space. And it's the most safest I've ever felt. So.
I want to interject and say, first of all, thank you so much for sharing something that is just so intimate and so absolutely necessary for people to understand. Can be a liberating experience. It's really something a lot of people don't understand. Even people who are queer themselves. Like, why bother coming out? Because empowerment through coming out is something that one is not really capable of understanding fully unless they've gone through it themselves. There's no other way to put it. And I also want to just highlight between the beautiful gift of the archives and all of the things that depicts and how that reflects in today's struggle, because there is still a struggle, right? And I know from my vantage point, working in a resource room on a campus like this, I find so much is still the same. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I remember so much of the zeitgeist and the dialogue and the demonizing and the way that HIV/AIDS was just sort of bandied around in this very cartoonish way. And people in my generation, the Xers, we were given a very particularly, coded kind of message. The folks doing the fighting, they were kept from arguing. And as I got older, it took a lot of digging to find that. And I now relish the opportunity to work with the ones that are coming up, who are still doing the fighting, they're still at it. And furthermore, that fight's kind of the same. I mean, we are still, we are better off in a lot of ways. I married my wife in New York, and it was just a bit before it was federally recognized, but I did get to get married in New York. She now works at St. John's, just so you know. But I will say that, but that fight is, it's real and it continues, and we are all kind of worried, given the rhetoric that's going around about how much of this we get to keep. So I think that the time is very prescient to have this discussion, to look at our history, to see what the movement came from and what we need to pick up the torch and do next. And the gift of being able to talk to you here and now. You gentlemen being able to share and give so much of yourselves in light of the fact that so many that you were alongside aren't here. It's just amazing and such a gift. And in terms of coming out and falling out, and in my case, being outed unwillingly, I think the next question is a really good one to consider for the what's next of the movement, because I personally feel it is a continuous movement. I know that it was led up in most part by particular figures and particular ideologies, and now it's grown, and there are, there's a big push for including Black and brown people, trans people, different brands of queerness that just are newer to vocabulary. But in light of everything that's been given in this amazing collection of papers and story and narrative and struggle, I'm very eager to hear from each of you, really, about where you feel the struggle is now in light of where it was, and what you personally think is the next right way to go, the next thing, whether it be for you personally or just as a general comment, either way. But I'm very intrigued. Obviously, I really want to hear what you got to say on this, just because I know, based on what you've given, a good chunk of what you've done and what you've thought, and now I want to see what other papers are coming. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to see what's next. So please.
Well, I think the biggest threat right now that I'm seeing is the stifling of discourse and around LGBT issues and life period. The bill in Florida, don't take gay bill. That's a huge threat. And we have Mr. Ron DeSantis, who's the governor there, and I don't know how political I can get here.
Go ahead. You're safe space. Get it.
He's a big contender for the next president.
Yeah.
And he may very well
That's the
bring
best
that.
they can do.
He may very well bring that local bill on a national level, and I think that's very good.
And I'm sorry, can you mention that bill again for those of us in the back?
Sure, it's making it
The Don't Say Gay bill.
Don't say gay bill. That's what they refer to it.
Yes.
It's a bill that largely bans the discussion of anything LGBT in the classroom.
Just a way to erase.
So it's like the second wave after like attacking critical race theory. Now we're going to.
Exactly.
It's right.
Absolutely. Just throw that in here. Why not?
If I'm not mistaken as well, administrators are obligated to tell parents as well.
Yes, they have to disclose.
Yes.
Discuss.
They have to disclose, yeah.
And then there's also the threat of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, Clarence
Thomas.
He's only getting started on that.
Yeah, so, I think if anything, we would think, how can we work along against that kind of tide of repression? I can only ask us.
You
What
keep
do we
fighting.
think? I mean, how do we
You keep fighting.
tackle something like that?
Me personally, growing up in the inner city and being African American, I was already faced with a lot of obstacles, single parent household, my mom working several jobs to, put food on the table, support me. I have seen a lot of toxicity, and I continue to see it. I feel like we have advanced as a country, but in a way, we still got some ways to go, and I want to be that vessel because we all have a right to an existence, a human existence, right? Like, no matter what that looks like, being Black, being Indigenous, being, brown. And so for someone to kind of dehumanize you or take that existence away, it's not okay. It's not right. So there is still a lot of work to be done. I know for me personally, I want to go back to the same communities that rejected me. Even though they're my people, they still deserve a fair shot at, redemption. Everybody turns a corner at some point, right? So though the community that shut me out, oh, you're gay, you're this, we don't want you, I'm still gonna help you because I know that everyone goes through trials and tribulations, no matter what that looks like, whether you're cisgender, transgender, asexual, bisexual, transsexual, we all hit our bumps in the road, and I feel that there's so much more work to be done, so continuing that work and fighting back against the people who say it's wrong to be gay, it's wrong to be trans, it's wrong to be different. It's just wrong, but they never have any logical explanation. And I want to go back to when I was talking about coming out and how ugly it was and why I was so closed off for years until I decided, opening up would help people. I was taken to therapy. It wasn't conversion therapy and other stuff you see about in media, but I was taken to a psychiatrist nonetheless, and might I add, the person was not Black, so it wasn't a person who I felt I could identify with or relate to. And they battered me for hours, maybe 2 hours, and just wanted to know pry into my life and ask me questions about my sexuality. And, my family, they thought that something was wrong with me because I had expressed feelings about, liking the same sex. And to them, it was just you're gay? like, no, like, this is not, we don't accept this. So, you know, my grandmother, my mother, they took me to a psychiatrist, and I remember that day very vividly because I told them nothing. I disclosed nothing. I sat there and played with the Etch-a-Sketch for like 2 hours and divulged nothing. The point I'm trying to make is there's so much more that still has to be done, and so much more like stuff that is already done, they're trying to now reverse. So I'm young, and Jay is young, and we're college students, and we're figuring it out, we're navigating, but we're going to continue the work that you've already done, because there's still so much more to go, so much more ways to go. And we don't want to be erased. We have a culture, like, you know, we have a flag, like, we have history, so we can't allow the powers that be to just shut us out and erase us, because, you know, we deserve a right to exist and continue to build upon our culture and our history.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. All that is just so incredibly important.
And let's clap it up for that.
I'm bringing it back to electoral politics, but you know, it's in that we have to look at the importance of how electoral politics just plays such a critical role in our well-being. And you know, it's our involvement in electoral politics that will eventually determine whether or not marriage is enshrined in the Constitution to protect us all forever. Okay, we have to work towards that. Right now, it's passed the House. This is the blanking on the name of the bill. It's Right to Marriage Act.
Yes.
The Right to Marriage Act. It's a bill passed in the House, and it's seeking to, and it's pending in the Senate, but it would enshrine the right to marry. So that's one that you know, largely depends on what elected officials we have in place. And the same can be said about just about anything, really, including diversity in schools. So I can't stress that enough. Electoral politics are getting involved in, you know, who our elected officials are. That's of prime importance.
Maybe if I could let people know, in fact, Jesus in 1996, when during the Clinton administration, enacted what became known as DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, more or less saying that states did not have to recognize a legal marriage from another state or outside that jurisdiction. And that bill was signed in the middle of the night. And in 1996. And so I remember Jesus, who might, if you don't mind me saying, might be in St. Vincent's Hospital getting treatment for his HIV status, in fact was fired up and would say, Brendan, they are debating our lives and our laws. Politicians in Washington are demeaning us and speaking so disgustingly about us.
Something so personal about us. And they were debating it right there. I remember watching C-SPAN at that, where they were debating the Defense of Marriage Act. And I was horrified. I was horrified at the thought of these largely older white men just determining what we are entitled to. And I just found that such a threat and so wrong. And I chose to do something about it.
Okay, and what did he do? So he gets out of his sick bed in the hospital, and he's just out, and soon he's in Greenwich Village with a card, gathering signatures, insisting on marriage equality, and that our loving be granted equal legal right as heterosexuals or anybody else. But I remember getting a sense of, it's not, more or less saying that Arthur Lord have always said, your silence will not protect you. And I said, how can I, and I call it being awakened, a sense of use the power that you have. Don't be just cynically disengaged. The movement I am part of is a movement of taking to the streets, being engaged, caring not just about justice for me, but for my brothers and sisters, and finding connections. I'm being honest with you. Marriage, I was like, what? For our kind? Yeah. I bought into that that's not for our kind. I have to be honest with you, it took me some time, and Jesus especially, who opened my eyes to, Brendan, you cannot be silent. You speak about AIDS, you speak about this, just in South Africa. What about our own people? There are people denigrating your life and your way of loving. And soon I was with Jesus on the streets. He'd be out with his card. So that's when even the general movement was not interested in marriage. And here he was, making the connections. As an immigrant from Ireland, I also knew that if you fell in love, you could go to City Hall and get married. And that was a pathway to becoming a citizen and to being legal in this country. So many of our community ended up in this undocumented space because, literally, it's like living in a silence, in an imprisonment, a terror. And so marriage was this pathway. Jesus, of course, in the hospital, our friends were we were denied even being allowed to visit our friends who were in hospital wards, who said, you are not legal family, and so many other issues. I had begun to be arrested. You could not visit your friends in prison because we had so whatever, that marriage. I want to say here, I am so proud to be sitting here with Jesus Lebrón, whose activism really awakened a movement for marriage equality on the streets of our city. He organized a rally on the steps of City Hall, bringing activists together. Lawyers were discussing it, Evan Wolfson and, the bigger, but Jesus had this way of just inspiring and awakening a grassroots movement and making connections between economics. And remember you telling me about the two women in the Bronx, if I'm correct, who were raising children from previous marriages but had no legal protections for their family, and how important this right was. And I am so grateful that we are survivors of those generations and our friends who died from AIDS and did not live to see, but we live to see our fight on the streets secure, that right to have our love for those of us who chose it, to have our love and all those rights. And I'm very proud it became a global movement all around the world. And Jesus and I set up a movement called the Civil Marriage Trail, which you can see about. I'm very happy to say that's my husband Tom down the back. And I got married in 2003 in Canada. We crossed the border. Jesus, then, as soon as I said, Brendan, let's form a movement to help couples cross the border to Canada, especially couples where people were dying from AIDS, dying from cancer, elderly, and I'm so proud of that. And you can see that downstairs as well. Just couples began to call us and say, are you the people who help people cross the border to Canada? And we heard some beautiful and very moving stories, who people said, I may die soon, but I want to have the dignity of having our love recognized and affirmed, and we did. And one of those, of course, if I can say here, was Edie Windsor, whose case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Edie, who married on May 22nd, 2007, a beautiful day, this elderly couple, and you never know, who were just living their lives, and yet who would know who changed lives themselves and changed history. And yet, that was how, because Jesus Lebrón agreed with me to form this group, Civil Marriage Trail Project. I sometimes was the person with the idea. He was sometimes the person, let's make it concrete, this is what you need to do, set up the website, and, but I think, that old phrase they would have in our movement where it says, the political is personal and the personal is political. I think the first thing, what do we have to do next, is don't waste another day of your beautiful life. Life is short. And live your life. Don't wait till, another good friend, Michael Judge, who said, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. And, you know, I would say that the first thing, what is your responsibility, is to live your life and to love it and to help others to do that as well. And then secondly, Jesus is right, get out, vote, make a difference in the world, you know. And, yeah.
One thing I just have to say on the work that I did, because I didn't just do work on marriage, I did little actions here and there on other issues, is that I allowed myself to get angry. I allowed myself to see things as they are. Sometimes we can sort of like dismiss things, and I've done that myself, where we just, you know, dismiss things and you know, maybe we're just not ready to hear the reality of things. But I somehow found a way to get past that and see that there were a lot of threats that we were living around, not just on AIDS, but on, you know, very right to exist. And so I was able to open my eyes and just, you know, address a lot of those issues. I mean, one was the New York Post. I don't know if you're all familiar, but that paper has been around for many, many decades. As bad as it is today, it was horrible back in the 80s. They would draw cartoons, characters of gay people that were so insulting on a daily basis. This is the New York Post. So I saw that, I got angry, and I organized a protest outside one of their offices, a very successful protest, and things like that. We just do those things because, you know, we have to allow ourselves to get angry and say, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to allow this to happen. This has to stop. And we have to do that as best we can.
Yeah. Making a difference, you know, and then of course, you see, look, sometimes our dates were often at protesting on the streets, and I love that our loving was just as much, you know, I wasn't being facetious when I said take our loving from the sheets to the streets, but there is something about be such a loving, alive, and loving self and the world and others, to work for change, to make a difference, and in whatever way you can, right? And it's just sometimes that would write. Taught me, by the way, even how to do a press release and write a letter to a newspaper. And it's sort of that, I often think of that, Audre Lorde, you know, getting over that silence or leaving it to somebody else. And I learned so many of those skills. But that political activism, you're so right. And of course, one of the biggest ones, huge campaign, another one that Jesus led, was around the CCRB, which stands for
Civilian Complaint Review Board. For those of you who don't know, that's a city body that oversees allegations of police brutality. And so they have a number of representatives from throughout the city who pretty much see these cases and address matters of police brutality. Well, anyway, there was this one person by the name of Ruben Diaz, many of you know, not all of you, Reverend Ruben Diaz. He was on the Civilian Complaint Review Board at the time, and he used his platform to spout very, very hateful stuff. At one point, behind the placard that read, "Those homosexuals are enemies of the evangelical doctrine, therefore they are enemies of mine in Jesus Christ." Okay? This is the kind of stuff that came out of his mouth. So, sure enough, I was livid, and I went, I got involved with that. There was a group of people that were hoping to oust him from the board, and we did so successfully. Eventually, he just gave it all up. But he continued to be a real hope. He was our biggest nemesis on same-sex marriage, and he continues to this day. And anyway, that was another situation, another threat that I saw, and I was just funny to see everything. But I'm proud I did. I'm proud I did open my eyes and did what I could.
I gotta know this about Ruben Diaz. I have to. I've been sitting on this. Okay, so like this whole time, I'm, think about it, and there's a truth telling, right? So in Roscoe Brown, I walked to my car from the resource room, and we got some like these banners. Some of y'all may know these banners and pictures and stuff. We got one up there of Ruben Diaz. I'm just like, I walk by, and I'm like, okay, but there's a silver lining on this, because when we opened up the LGBTQI resource room here on this campus, and by the way, that was a student-led effort. Students went out and collected signatures all over campus. They really did the research, did the footwork, did a lot to really bring this to the fore, put together a proposal, put it in front of the president. In that proposal, we had collected some letters. And one of the letters in that proposal, I can show it to you if you want to see it, Ruben Diaz Jr., supporting our efforts to open an LGBTQI resource room at Bronx Community College. It's an interesting turn of events. So to that earlier point that you mentioned about how, people can learn, people can change, and you never really know what's coming around the corner in terms of the next generation. You just can't give up. I don't think that I expected that to happen. I had a friend of a friend who did some knocking on doors, and that letter happened. And I think that's a testament, right? Because now that we're fighting again and again and again about a lot of the things that unfortunately you fought, and back then I think there were a lot of feelings that you put the nail in, but we're back at it, right? Like there are some states that my wife and I, with our daughter, don't feel comfortable going to, right? Because what happens, something happens, is my wife going to be able to care for us and be able to visit us in the hospital? That's a thing now, again. So I guess I'm wondering, in light of the fact that these babies are here, living their truth and doing their fighting, but how often do they get a chance like this, right? Just curious, because then also, we talk amongst ourselves, and all of us are all in our way fledgling in the fight. So I guess I wonder where to begin. Like, I know that there are things that we can do, and there are big umbrella things, and here we are in an institution of learning, and we're trying to nurture one another and nurture the next generation, but where to begin? Because it's not easy for everybody, right?
Well, I had a friend that had asked that same question back in the early 80s when I was like, wanting to do more. His name was Carl Goodman. He was one of the early founders of Activism, and just a wonderful, wonderful, intelligent, brilliant man. I asked him, so Carl, what do you think I should do? What can I do? He said, just pick. It's on this pick. It's out there. There are things for you to do. Just open your eyes. A lot of threats, things that are happening out there that if you only allow yourself to see, you will see that are discriminatory or threatening or just not good. And I know that's not exactly the answer you wanted.
No, that's the answer.
Yeah.
It's
worked for you.
I mean, I can think off the top of my head. What are the things that we can just right now decide to do? What we can decide to ensure that our schools are much more LGBTQI friendly, right?
And LGBTQ protections as well.
That's right. Exactly.
They're stripping them away, little by little. I mean, when I first stepped onto this campus, and I needed to use the bathroom. And I think for anybody who struggles or has had struggles with identity, the bathroom is a very private and intimate thing. I'll never forget, I was in Times Square and I had a couple drinks with some friends at the bar, and I needed to use the restroom. And I go into this restroom, it's a men's restroom I had, and I didn't see anyone who looked like me, but that's beyond the point. The looks that I received when I entered the bathroom, it was almost as if I was extraterrestrial or something. And it stuck with me. It made me feel like I can't even use the bathroom in peace and have that intimate moment to myself. So, goes back to the point I was making before about, yes, we have advanced in a lot of ways, but we're still living back. Like I still feel like I'm in my Stonewall moment right now in 2022. If I can't even go into the bathroom without a bunch of men ogling me or looking at me as if I'm like an other when I enter in the bathroom. So in a way, it's like, yes, we have come far, but there's still a lot of shit that needs to be, excuse my French, but there's a lot of things that need to be, people's thinking need to be reworked, and people have to come out of the mindsets that they have. And yeah, so I just had to share that because a lot of things still bother me now, even though they have happened, maybe 10 years ago, it still sticks with you. And it kind of makes you think like, well, do I even get up and fight another day? Or do I just let them have it? But then you're like, no, screw that. Like, it's to fight back. It's to
like getting angry.
It's to get angry. It's to be angry.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of women have been angry over Roe v. Wade.
Oh, that's right.
There you go, because the point came back to me. So it's a human fight. It's a women's fight. It's a trans fight. It's a black fight. There's so many things that we should be out here fighting for. So I think when people take the LGBTQIA part out and just put in the human part, and once we start unlearning and learning new behaviors and realizing that this is a human issue, it's a human rights issue. Like they're telling women what to do with their bodies. Like it's a human rights issue. So we have a ton of things to be out here fighting for. And the moment we unify and come together, then I think it'll be worth fighting for these things because now we have unity, we have togetherness, we have inclusion, we have diversity, we have all of these things wrapped into one, and we have people fighting for their human rights. So that's very important.
It's right. I mean, on abortion alone, if women are being told what to do with their bodies, right? Is it really all that far apart to think that the next step would be to tell LGBT people what they can and can't do with their bodies?
Right. I mean, Obergefell is built on that same premise, right? It's built on privacy. And if Roe v. Wade was knocked down on account of that, then Obergefell is next.
I actually want to interject a bit on that. Prior to the midterms that just happened, I actually would have very much fell into that same thought that, of course, Republicans push a very cultural agenda. However, we've seen that what happened once the Supreme Court took out abortion rights protection, the country galvanized, and all these red states, abortion swept through the ballot, it was protected. I don't think that it would be smart politically on their side to push an agenda of taking away any more rights. I don't think the fear-mongering that comes with that is, of course, there's the possibility that it's always going to happen, especially in these states where it's majority-controlled Republican. That's always going to be the case. But I don't... Because again, we beat expectations this midterm. You know, we were supposed to go a lot worse. So in terms of that dynamic, I think we should probably tone down the rhetoric for both sides because it's not helping anyone.
It's a lot of BS.
At the end of the day, it is going to. But of course, on the point of Lebrón, Mr. Lebrón, the civic duty of each person. You know, vote. That's on top of that. I think it's a little bit too much of fear-mongering going on there.
So I was thinking as well, just listening, is one of the most profound things we can do as well is actually have some self-care. Say, we carry pain, I've been bruised, I've been hurt, I've experienced violence at a church or some spell, whatever it is. It's okay to pause and to get help and to seek out someone you can trust and who will create that listening space for you where you can bring your pain, bring your story. Otherwise, we carry this all around with us. Look, I've got friends. I'm 64. I really have friends who say to me, Brendan, I wish I could have come out to my parents before they died. I wish I had love like you have had. I wish I could be out. Do you know what I mean? it's that helping one another just to live well another day. And I want to say how moved I am just by your courage and journey, and even finding each other here on the campus, and that's bringing you here. We never know the journey that some person has gone through, or the struggle, or the pain, or the hurt that they've had to work through. That's coming out. It's not just waving out. Do you know what I mean? It's sometimes hell, and it's coming out. And I'm very moved by every person around the world. Look, I've got friends in Poland where towns were saying declaring themselves LGBTQ free zones. And, so where homophobia becomes something that is cheered, and culturally that's still a reality here. Homophobia, let's be very clear, we know is poison and kills and divides. Homophobia hurts not just our community, families, churches, communities. It's this toxic poison in our souls, in our spirits. It's death. It really is. And that's why I'm so grateful for this. First of all, can I say as well, I'm so grateful for Stephen and the Bronx Community Historical Society for saying yes, and for putting the energy to say, this is an important story to tell, and to say, we welcome these archives. And because if anything, nobody has told the stories of the LGBT movement or community in the Bronx. And the same stories and do you know what I mean? And I'm so grateful for Jesus, who agreed to pass over the papers and the stuff of his life and open up about his story. So there's something about that self-care thing and helping one another, being there for one another when the days, I'm so grateful I could turn to Jesus and grieve and weep, and at my most painful moments when I was fired from my job, when my God, do you know what I mean? By the way, that word again, that friendship thing, I just want to say, there was one thing I would say, I know it's weird, I'm usually on the streets with politicians, but Jesus, I want to say, taking a pause to care for yourself. Make your bed, love yourself. Really. And number two, I would say, work at finding and holding onto a friend and nurturing that friendship. Wow. That's since 1987. We've had this friendship. It's gorgeous. It's lovely. Friends are so beautiful in our lives, aren't they? They really are. And I know it's kind of weird, but I was going to say, as a gay person, I often felt incredibly alone. This weird look. I know people might go, Brendan Vale only, that's bizarre. He's the most live wire in the room. But I really have to say, there was other times where I watched television and all of a sudden somebody is spouting this poison of homophobia, or a church or this, or a college that says, wow, we only do a queer thing in June. It's like, hello, we're not just LGBT during the month of June. Colleges have to put more resources. I would love to see the city giving more resources to Stephen's project I would love to see, if I can say here, this is such a great story, and I love what you've done with these beautiful panels, which I hope we'll all go downstairs and see. I hope this gets on the road. I really do. And people can learn about this Jesus Lebrón and this Lebrón family from the Bronx, and how just he doing his part changed lives and changed history. And I got to be a part of that. And by Jesus, I'm so grateful for the queers who have helped change history. I think of, Bayard Rustin and Edie Windsor, and, we can name them all, and Sylvia River. But you, in your own way, I know you just being you, thank you for that, and it's a beautiful thing, and I'm really honored to meet you and know of your work here on the campus, and thank you for that. That's not always easy. You know what I mean? But it's lovely when you do. And I think what you inspire, not just when you say, they are themselves. You kind of awaken something in others as well. Because there's a freedom. It takes work to get to a place of that. And I love our word of our movement. People talk about queer liberation. It's a freedom. I often say the freedom to live and to love. And but we have a work, don't we? And I love, like here, the first governor of Maryland.
Yeah.
Out lesbian. Right?
It's
great. It's just, hearing you talking about being married and your wife, and this is your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we had our first trans member of Congress as well.
That's right, we sure did.
Oh, yes.
We sure did.
That's right. A lot to celebrate and
Change is coming. Change is coming.
There's some wins, but
yes.
a few minor setbacks. But I don't know. I'm a strong believer in seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. When I don't talk about this often, but again, I feel that this is the space for it. Dealing with depression and not knowing how to really come out of that. You don't really want to get out of bed. You don't have a lust for life. You don't really have fuel to keep going. And then I remember a friend, we're not friends anymore, but they were going through some tough times, and I'm just like, even throughout all of my issues, being rejected, coming out, didn't have, really like a stable environment to really thrive in, and couch to couch, and just trying to find my place and purpose in the world. I would tell her, things are bad, but they could be worse. Like, they could be worse, way worse off. Like, I would see people sleeping in the village. I would see, guys turning tricks for money. I would see, there were just so many layers to this pain that our people have been suffering through for so long. So I started, every day I would get up, even if I wasn't having the best day or a bad night from before, I would always find that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's led me to come back to school with a newfound purpose and a newfound mentality, because I walk in my purpose every day. I hope you don't mind me sharing, but we had a brief convo before this where I would sometimes walk with my head down. I don't know why. It came from years of judgment, and I'm big on perception, and I believe first impressions are always a lasting one. And when you first meet somebody and you introduce yourselves to them, I always fixate on how people see me. I don't know why. I just think it comes from years and years of people judging me and having preconceived notions. But when you walk in your purpose, nobody can ever take that away from you. So you own that. And when you walk into a room, you own who you are, you own your identity, you own your existence. And people resonate with that authenticity. So that's very important. And that's something I strongly, firmly believe in. And that's what's going to be my primary goal in the work that I'm going to do, someday, is to get the youth out of that funk. We're not to be depressed. We're not to be walking around with our heads down and woe is me. We're not victims. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor, and I'm here to help the next wave of survivors.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. In the interest of time, maybe Jesus, if you have any kind of final remarks to wrap up the conversation, and then we'll have a brief period for Q&A from folks. How's that sound to everyone?
Jay and I were talking about this earlier. The importance of representation. We hear so little about LGBT movement from the Bronx or activists coming from the Bronx. We're out there, we're there, we're just not seen oftentimes, and not appreciated or whisked away or dismissed. And so having someone like yourself, Stephen, allow this to happen, this exhibition, this celebration. It's means the world, not just for me, but it's going to mean a lot for all the other students who are coming across it and seeing that, hey, there are Puerto Rican activists from the Bronx who did stuff that are very proud to be LGBT and that did great work. And people need to hear that. People need to hear about their own.
As a fellow Puerto Rican, I feel proud.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. And now we'll have just a little period, probably not too long because it's getting late here, but maybe 10 minutes for Q&A. So if folks have questions, basically we'll take them first come, first serve. Sure, go ahead. And if you have a question for one of the particular individuals up here, you can direct it to them. Otherwise, it can be just a general question.
Sure. I guess anyone might be able to answer, but I'll direct it first at the elders. As we go forward in the fight that seems to still be cooking, I'm wondering how you recommend to people to strengthen alliances. Like right now I've heard about the feminists that are out there in academia and the world right now are pushing away the trans movement because trans people aren't female, so how can they be part of feminism? And so I'm wondering how you've dealt with such schisms in the past and what are the tricks to solidifying alliances?
Well, I can say that particular struggle or push and pull of the lesbian feminist movement, or even the feminist movement, not wanting to welcome transgender, that's been going on for a while. I believe we've gotten better at that. I hope. I can't answer correctly. But as far as like building alliances, someone else would have to answer that.
Well, I for one definitely interject. I actually gave a brief little speech last night in my communications class, and it was the first speech I've ever given in a public forum. Because as I said earlier, I'm terrified of speaking in front of people. But I have a lot to say. So, the speech I gave last night was talking about hate crimes, specifically against transgender people of color and gender non-binary individuals. And I believe we're up to like 37 deaths in this year alone. Last year was 57. So, I don't see them talking about this on a global scale. I see them talking about Don't Say Gay and Roe v. Wade and all of these other issues. But when it comes to Black trans women being killed and shot dead in the street, I'm not seeing enough outrage. When George Floyd was killed in 2020, you saw people on a global scale protesting, fighting, whether they were looting or whatever. There was outrage, and I don't see enough outrage when it comes to trans people being killed. So when we're speaking about alliances, I think it's very important for allies and people who consider themselves to be allies to really be conscientious of what it is to be an ally, what that looks like. If you consider yourself an ally of the LGBT community, the trans community, the Black community, whatever community, really do your research and do your homework and learn the plight of our people so you're able to really educate yourselves and then say, I'm an ally because I did this, or I marched when you guys were out there pounding the pavement for the 32 people who were killed last year, So my point is, it's very important that we unite and we form those alliances so that they can see togetherness on a global scale and stop pitting the different marginalized communities against each other, because that is the biggest problem, is that there's not enough unity and there's so much division. We saw it in 2020 with the election. We're still seeing it now when they stormed the Capitol. We're seeing so much division and not enough unity. So I think that is what we need to focus more on in this world, is unifying.
My take for that would just be give it time. It's still relatively.
How much time we got?
As opposed to, just forcefully trying to create bridges or something that aren't going to last, again. And of course, you could bring up something like, aren't I a woman too, for stuff like this, but it's something that, again, I just feel like it's going to be something time-wise as people become more having these relationships, whether it be having a child or a niece or a cousin that is trans and having that experience, that personal experience, they become less radicalized, I think, and more open to this acceptance.
Well, I actually was a victim of a hate crime, so that's why this is a very heavy topic, but again, I'm not seeing enough outrage. And it really pisses me off, I'll be frank, because when, I'm just going to use this as an example, Elizabeth Smart, I think we all know who she is. When she was abducted, you saw her face. You could not walk down the street and not see a picture or know who Elizabeth Smart was. We all know who Elizabeth Smart is. And I don't see the same energy when it comes to, I'm sorry?
Yeah, her too.
Her too, yeah. So you get where I'm going with this. I don't see the outrage when it comes to the LGBT plight, trans issues and things of that nature. I see more resistance than I see outrage. So there's still a lot of unlearned behaviors that need to be unlearned, and there needs to be like a reset, a cultural reset, a world reset. People need to change their views. It's okay to not accept, the lifestyle or, the movement, but understanding it and just learning to accept people for whatever their lifestyle looks like is what needs to happen. And it needs to happen fast because the next generation, the next wave of kids and youth and activists, we're here. Like, I'm not going anywhere tomorrow or next week. I'm still going to be here. So, there needs to be like a reset for people to really, be on one accord.
There's a lovely film, if you get a chance to see it. It's called Pride.
Yes.
Which is about people who could never imagine finding a bridge or a connection or whatever, and it was about LGBT grassroots activists in London who were concerned about the plight of the coal miners during the Thatcher administration and decided that they would do something to support the miners and raise money and it's a and both sides had to overcome fears and stereotypes of one another and did. But it's a lovely film of how that is possible. And that's why I'm grateful as well for really, even when I think of Bayard Rustin or, as a gay man, and yet the most inspiring and important, the African-American organizer of the most famous, one of the most important civil rights marches in Washington, that our movement has crossed over and built bridges. Of course, I think it's about creating of listening and asking, how can I help? It's this soulful listening and paying attention and writing to a paper or even writing to somebody in prison or somebody who's lost a family who's transgender child or somebody who's been lost or killed, taking a moment and just being human and being present and being there and building those bridges, and because as they say, as the slogan says of our movement, the people united will never be defeated. It's almost so important that we do it. We need it for survival, to overcome the barriers that are placed between us and among us, and to find ways to build solidarity across our divisions and our divides. But I love when our people, when our community assert themselves in the room. Often it's cool if we're silent. We love your support as long as you don't, whatever. But I love that our world is changing. We're insisting on bringing our energy and our passion. And I know with Tom, I've worked on the issue of sickle cell, and we've been working, and they often say, wow, we're inspired by the likes of ACT UP and other movements. We wish, and that's where we can teach and learn from each other. Anyway, sorry.
Great. I think maybe time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up.
There's two in the room.
Oh, like two questions in the room?
Yeah.
I couldn't see them.
Sorry.
What do you think the Democrats need to do to protect gay rights and trans rights?
Do we really have to go there?
Maybe it's a question.
What do we think Democrats can do to support LGBTQ rights?
They need to list. Actually do things. That's
Actually
pass legislation.
Actually do something. Like actually get up come out those offices, open the blinders and see that there are real life issues that are affecting people who look like us every day. And the minute people start to give a damn, that's when they can start focusing on, okay, what can we do now to put some protections in place for a group of individuals such as ourselves. And I think that's very important because whenever election time rolls around, you see the ads plastered all over and we need your support and vote for me, but then you vote for these people and
I think there's just a disgust currently.
Where is the
If anything, there should be a pressure campaign of trying to make sure they're following through with the campaign promises, where the money's coming from, who's giving them these campaign contributions. If these companies are anti-gay or whatever, common sense, they might not pass legislation that's pro-gay, LGBT, trans, etc. So I think long story short, just
I would say very quickly, in the collection is there's a number of files on a project that Jesus Lebrón organized called Project Stand Out. So very quickly, addressing the human rights of LGBT people is not a democratic thing, or it's a human thing for all of us, whether you're the Pope, whom I'm really glad is coming around, whether you're a cleric, whether you're a teacher in a classroom, whether you're a factory worker. It's beyond politics. It truly is. It's about life and love. And the most important thing about being human. What is getting in the way of helping this child, this teenager flourish, find liberty, equality, what's the US sort of American freedom and all the things that it's not a democratic. So, and I'm grateful. So Jesus got us writing to every politician in Albany, from the most conservative to the most democratic, to them all. And politicians, you always give me a sense of, you actually communicate with them, anticipating their responsibility for all the citizens. And LGBT rights are not just a democratic thing or a progressive thing. It's a human rights thing for all of us.
But to be fair to this young man, I'm sorry, what's your name? Chris? Yeah. Hi, Chris. I feel as if you're entitled to a concrete answer, am I right? I mean, I feel as if, you're asking what could we do to get the Democrats to, just to speak up more, or be more advocates for LGBT people. I think one thing is, we know that Republicans have often had anti-LGBT rhetoric, what have you, language on their platform. The Republican platform is such that we support this, we don't support that, we don't support that. We need to ensure that the Democratic Party, for example, takes on a proactive approach towards LGBT people, that they name it, that they are full-fledged, straight up front in support, and publicly, very public about their support for our rights. And is that the case now? I'm not so sure.
I love all the stories. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. And when I think about all the large-scale political actions you've done, I also like the stories that reflect on the spaces where folks came together. And for those of us who want to support those spaces in the Bronx, where are those spaces in the Bronx for the community? And how can we augment and amplify the work that Em has been doing with the LGBTQ plus resource room here on the campus to amplify those spaces for students and young people here. Would you have any pearls of wisdom to share around those spaces? What spaces are there currently in the Bronx that folks need to amplify and you want to shout out to?
YMCA. Do we hear they have any?
Well, Destination Tomorrow. I think they've been working on it, for sure. And it tells you a lot that they're so busy you can't even get them to answer an email someday.
And where are those spaces?
At Destination Tomorrow.
Okay.
You know, the Bronx has kind of a fraught history when it comes to like LGBTQI services. There's been some ups and downs, right? Hopefully we're seeing an uptick in the way that that's happening and more support at the Bronx-born
spaces like that Oscar Wilde like bookstore.
I know,
like,
right?
Are there spots like that?
Well, there have been LGBT community centers in the Bronx on and off. Is there one?
They have a
That's
Callan.
Destination
There's a
Tomorrow
Callan
right
now.
Lord
It is, okay.
in the Bronx here.
Callan Lord.
Callan Lord is in the
There's
Bronx.
a Callan Lord in the Bronx as well?
They do have a Bronx location. That's where I got it.
California.
California.
Yeah. But it is interesting, right? That these spaces in the Bronx are not as easily located. I mean, I have a friend who did her graduate work on like the fast disappearing lesbian bar. That is not a thing. They're like, you can count the very few lesbian bars that are left in the United States. Look it up. It's kind of
Did
pathetic.
they make a film about that?
Yeah. No, it's really weird. Like they're just disappearing, right? And so, you know, she did a lot of this work, and then I just offhandedly, because I see her often, I was like, so what about the Bronx though? And she was like, I got nothing. I was like, come on now, come on, you can't be telling me that lesbians did not get drunk in the Bronx. And she's like, yeah, but we don't know. Like, because again, like the history seems to be a very sort of particular flavor where you take that underground or you take it to the city. And so, like, that's why it's so hard to capture. That's what's so exciting about this, because there's so little, and I don't think people realize that. Like, the Bronx didn't leave a big fat footprint that's easy to find when it comes to the gay rights movement or any locations like what you're alluding to, Cynthia. There's a reason that it's hard to find, because they go underground, and traditionally, folks from the boogie down take that to the city. And then, I mean, I've had my own students tell me this today. Right? That like when you come back to the city on the train, you just tuck that pride flag right back in your pocket, and you just put on your best walk, and you just get back home. And it's still a reality, right? Which is why it's so hard to find these spaces, and why this is so amazing, because now people can say, oh yeah, and then maybe people will come out of the woodwork a little bit. They see what you have given, and then they're like, oh my God, yeah, I remember. And then we start collecting those stories, and some of this doesn't die, because it is hard to find.
There's no LGBTQI group meeting at the public library at the main branch over here?
In the Bronx?
On Fordham Road.
Need to do an extension center over there.
Right. I would love to see spaces like this, like colleges, educational spaces, where young people are maybe coming from their high school and into college and becoming themselves, and teachers who have a huge influence and impact on what you give a student access to, and an amazing, powerful role in the life of a young person, you know, in your classroom and in your space. Having the sensitivity to keep your eye out and your heart out for that LGBT person, and creating a relationship of trust, and where that person can just be themselves. So even at 3, I would say, 1, 2, 3, is take the light, and this is where Stephen has come in, who said yes, and said, gosh, let's tell Jesus Lebrón story, and it's so inspiring and so wonderful, and it's only one. My motto is, it's not that there's no stories, they are waiting to be found. There are other stories like Jesus Lebrón, whom you may not know about. They're just waiting, and of course that's scholarship and that's commitment. There are stories waiting to be found, discovered, and told. And I'm sure I can't speak for him, but I bet if your class or you want to bring him back to tell a story, or I'm just very, very proud of the Bronx and Jesus and the Lebrons and this. I'm so proud of today, you know.
But for some reason, when you were saying that, it just brought to mind to me, you know, just the importance of just even having a pride flag on the school door, maybe the principal's door, what have you. And they can't even do that in Florida. Look how scary. I mean, that's scary. I mean, a teacher could be fired or dismissed or disciplined for having a simple pride flag posted in their office behind their desk or what have you. We can't allow that to happen across the United States. Because if that starts to happen, we are covered. We just really are.
And I don't think it's alarmist. I come from Texas, y'all. It's real. I think we live in a place in this country where thankfully we have some insulation. I mean, there's ugliness everywhere, but we are able to move freely compared to other places that are not that far away, where we all have family, we know people. It's not just a news story. It's real, and they're suffering, and it's very different for them. And so I think I don't want to, go any further than saying that, like, part of the reason that we live in the space that we do up here is because of you and people like you who did the work, who weren't afraid when it was far scarier to do this stuff. I mean, those of us kind of doing it now, we are not up against what you were up against. I mean, what you did.
Let's clap for that.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been such a wonderful occasion, and really honored to have all of you here and to listen in on your conversation and just soak up so much. And just as an added blurb here, I'll say that Jesus' collection is really meant to be just the beginning. We're doing a lot of different documentation work at the Bronx Historical Society right now. So basically, we're always recording oral history. So this is an invitation. Please come to me, and I want to record your oral histories because one thing that is very clear in working with archives of the Bronx and places like the Bronx, if this kind of active preservation work isn't done, the histories of folks in the Bronx and places like the Bronx, those are the histories that are swept under the rug as soon as possible. They're thrown out. I mean, because of literal economic situation, in many cases, people just cannot hold on to their histories in ways that wealthier people can. So we're doing everything we can to preserve the histories, especially of working class people of color, LGBTQ folks, really all oppressed peoples. I mean, and in the Bronx, that's the vast majority of people who live in the Bronx. So come find us. We'll preserve your histories, whether in oral, documentary, photographic, whatever form it might take, or whatever hybrid form it might take. So then when some assholes come down the line and say, 10 years down the line, that this history doesn't exist, we can say, no, actually we have thousands of boxes, so see yourself out the door. Anyway, so...
With those words.
I think that's all. If we could all just maybe give Jesus a round of applause. We love you.
And maybe we could have a round of applause for Dr. Stephen Payne.
Oh, yeah.
Community colleges, Cynthia Tupar.
And Brendan, and the
Brendan.
cameraman,
Everybody, and Alex.
and everyone who
Alex,
is also.
thank you so much. Everybody, please feel free to dig in and also take advantage of the exhibition. Today is the closing, so after this weekend, the panels will come down. So please take advantage if you haven't had a chance already to check out the wonderful exhibit downstairs. Please help yourself to snacks. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.